do I do if I'm not chasing anything? What do I do if I've got everything that I need? It's a question that no one's prepared me to answer. Where do I go if I'm right where I'm supposed to be? Where do I go if wherever I am home? It's a question I'm presently wanting to answer. Is the usual way doesn't work for me now? That's a void I know nothing about. What if the race is over and we all automatically win? What if the game is ended long before it even begins? What if the test has been taken and we're all passing again and again? If the race is over, what then? What do I say if it's all perfect anyway? What do I say if I'm not here to change anyone? It's a question I truly don't know how to answer. How do I live? My life is eternity. How do I live if I'm no longer afraid to die? It's a mystery, no one can give me an answer. If the usual way doesn't work anymore, there's no map for what life has in store. What if the race is over and we all automatically win? What if the game is ended even before it even begins? What if the test has been taken? We're all passing again and again. If the race is over, what then? What is the purpose of time here on earth? How do I now define my death and birth? For that matter, what is my life really worth in the end? What's time to give and what's mine to receive? Whom do I worship? What do I believe? Seems every answer comes right back to me in the end. What if the race is over and we all automatically win? What if the game is ended long before it even begins? What if the test has been taken? We're all passing again and again. If the race is over and we're all born victorious, if the race is over, what then?
Thank you, Nick. Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Community Church. I am Regina Nelson, and I'm happy to be your lay leader. Our building is on Shaver Road in Portage, Michigan, on the ancestral lands of the Peoria Potawatomi people. We pay our respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. It is a little brick church with the rainbow flag and the Black Lives Matter banner out front, because we believe that love is love, and it is our responsibility to dismantle white supremacy and build a beloved community that benefits us all. We are served most Sundays by our minister, Reverend G. Ludwig McCartney. Unfortunately, Reverend G is unable to be with us this morning for health reasons, but UUCC member and retired Unitarian Universalist minister, Harold Boy, has graciously agreed to fill in. If you are joining us on Facebook for the first time, welcome. We're excited that you tuned in. We invite and encourage you to attend the Zoom coffee hour following the service to get to know us better. You can find the link to coffee hour in the comments section of this video. To learn more about our church, including our programs for children and youth and other opportunities to connect with us during the week, visit our website at uucommunitychurch.org. We have some events coming up this week that you may be interested in. On Thursday, December 17th at 7 p.m., we will be joined by Marcel Fable the Poet Price, the outgoing poet laureate of Grand Rapids. He is also an author, activist, a mental health advocate, and helped found a nonprofit that works with schools to provide young people opportunities to process life events through poetry, creative writing, and performance art. Fable the Poet will share his story with us and his thoughts about how we should go about building a more just and equitable world. It should be a fascinating conversation. On Friday, December 18th at 4 p.m., Reverend Harold Boy will lead an exploration of the history of the creation and implementation of the atomic bomb and the ways we can solve our disputes, not with the war option, but with negotiation, diplomacy, and compromise. Visitors are welcome to all of our gatherings. Please join us. So, special thanks to everyone who is helping to make this morning's service possible. Our musician, our tech team, and you. Now, let us center our hearts and minds by lighting the chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. Please join Freya in saying our chalice lighting words, and she will be in front of the UUCC Christmas cactus that was donated by longtime member Faye Clifton, who is now deceased.
In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm privileged and honored to be asked to share once again my thoughts. Although it's sad, the reason that I'm being asked to do this, and I want us to just take a moment to think of our friend and minister, Reverend G. Now, the following is a reading by Martin Luther King Jr. in a sermon that he called "The Strength to Love," that he gave at the Ebenezer Church in Atlanta, Georgia, the same church that his father had served. It's a dark reading, actually, because he explicates the problems that are facing us, what he calls the midnight within the social order. But we need to hear this in order to identify the problems that face us if we're to solve them. And as the title of the sermon suggests, the antidote to these problems is love. It is midnight within the social order. On the international horizon, nations are engaged in a colossal and bitter contest for supremacy. 2 world wars have been fought within a generation, and the clouds of another war dangerously low. Man now has atomic and nuclear weapons that could, within seconds, completely destroy the major cities of the world. Yet the arms race continues, and nuclear tests still explode in the atmosphere, with the grim prospect that the very air we breathe will be poisoned by radioactive fallout. Will these circumstances and weapons bring the annihilation of the human race? When confronted by the midnight in the social order, we have in the past turned to science for help. And little wonder, on so many occasions, science has saved us. When we were in the midnight of physical limitation and material inconvenience, science lifted us into the bright morning of physical and material comfort. When we were in the midnight of rippling ignorance and superstition, science brought us to the daylight of the free and open mind. When we were in the midnight of dread plagues and diseases, science, through surgery, sanitation, and the wonder drugs, ushered in the bright day of physical health, thereby prolonging our lives and making for greater security and physical well-being. How naturally we turn to science in a day when the problems of the world are so ghastly and ominous. But alas, science cannot rescue us, for even the scientist is lost in the terrible midnight of our age. Science gave us the very instruments that threaten to bring universal suicide. So modern man faces a dreary and frightening midnight in the social order. Let us take a moment to think on these words. This sermon is a continuation of the past sermon I gave on acceptance in using Reinhold Niebuhr's Serenity Prayer. This is how he originally wrote the prayer. God, give us grace to accept with serenity the things that cannot be changed, courage to change the things that should be changed, and the wisdom to distinguish the one from the other. As we can note, that prayer, the words have been streamlined, has been used by Alcoholics Anonymous in every meeting. And those words are, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. How the AA modifications came about, no one knows. The prayer first became famous because of the encouragement from Niebuhr's good friend, Howard Robbins. Robbins had heard Niebuhr give that prayer in a small country church, and he encouraged him in late 1943, at the height of World War II, to have them published in the Book of Prayers and Services for Armed Forces for the benefit of giving comfort and hope to the soldiers. It was the first time it was ever published. As to the story about AA, listen now to the words of Reinhold Niebuhr's daughter, Elizabeth Sefton, from her book, The Serenity Prayer, Faith in Politics in Times of Peace and War. These are her words. A short time later, Alcoholics Anonymous, then a fledgling small organization, scarcely a decade old, with Father's permission, also started to use the prayer in their regular meetings. Their version frames the prayer in the first person singular and simplifies the opening. It admits the spiritually spiritually correct but difficult idea of praying for grace, to accept with serenity that which we cannot change. It focuses instead on the simpler notion of attaining serenity to accept that which cannot be changed. My father let this happen and didn't fuss when the wordings were altered, though he minded it. Another change is more serious. In the second clause, courage to change what should be changed becomes, in the AA rendering, simply courage to change what can be changed. Goodness me, just because something can be changed doesn't mean it must be changed. More important, this way of putting it reduces the scope of the imperative. It speaks merely of what we think might be managed to alter at any given moment, to change that which we cannot change. But there are circumstances that should be changed, yet may seem beyond our powers to alter. And these are the circumstances under which the prayer is most needed. So for today, my friends, I will speak of courage, because courage is what we need now. Certainly, I think we can understand Niebuhr and his daughter Elizabeth's concern that courage is not necessarily a positive attribute. Indeed, some people who have acted courageously have done so that cause tremendous harm. For example, Bill Maher, during his show Politically Incorrect many years ago, shortly after the tragic event of the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon on 11 September 2001, made a comment that caused great controversy concerning the idea of courage. President George W. Bush said that those terrorists acted cowardly. Bill Maher, on the other hand, said this: "We have been the cowards, lobbing cruise missiles some 2,000 miles away. That's cowardly. Staying in the airplane when it hits the building, say what you want about it, it's not cowardly." People became so angry with Mayer that he was forced off the air, which belies the intent of his show, which was to bring people together to share unpopular ideas. Truly, though, Bill Maher was correct and President George W. Bush was wrong. It was not lack of courage that made those terrorists do what they did, but because people confused the idea of courage as being an absolute positive, they did not want to connect that idea to the terrorists. What we can condemn about those men and their actions is that they acted immorally, purposely killing innocent people, and at the same time, civilians dying they would consider as collateral damage. But any one of us with an ounce of humanity would say that it was an evil act. No, it was not that they lacked courage that they did that. They simply lacked common decency. But Niebuhr is calling for us as a community, and not just as individuals, to do what needs to be done, to do the right thing. And that can be difficult because, well, we are afraid. I believe now more than ever, we're called upon to summon up our courage to respond to the difficult, almost intractable problems facing us, and to try to solve them, not just for ourselves, but for our children and for future generations. Lately, one of those problems has been the sinister acts of our political leaders. damaging our democracy, making us afraid, and encouraging people to think of our fellow citizens as enemies, which will in turn encourage them, and I use that word advisedly, encourage them to use violence, much like the terrorists on September 11th. President Trump has called upon public servants to do everything in their power to overturn this year's fair and legitimate election, our election. It saddens me that people would follow him in his nefarious venture, knowing that he does not care about us, about anyone except himself. He does not care about our thoughts or feelings, about our pains or our stories. He uses people, and I pity those who are taken in by his con game. But these public servants, they're doing his bidding, are participating in a coup, an unprecedented attack on our democracy. It may be that these rebels who are acting to destroy the very foundations of democracy are doing so in the belief that they're working for the betterment of our nation. In other words, they're acting like the 9/11 terrorists. But God help them if they know in their heart of hearts that they are hurting our democracy and the American people and acting cynically for the sake of their political careers, because then they will belong to the pantheon of American traitors, beginning with Benedict Arnold, including Tokyo Rose, Aldrich Ames, Robert Hansen, John Walker Jr., and Jonathan Pollard. I do believe that these renegades will look back, many of them, if not all of them, will look back on their actions with regret. Like many of those who have supported immoral and illegal actions in their lives that have hurt people and later have come to the realization of the depravity of their actions, they too will know that they have acted immorally, unpatriotically, and thus will know their guilt and shame. But then apologies are not called for, but rather it will be a time for them to make the world a better place simply because they have been alive. And they will do so by acting with compassion and a clear mind. In a way, the idea of courage does come out of the idea of acceptance. If we are to do what we think is right, then it's important for us to accept ourselves and know what makes us afraid. For courage is not being fearless, but rather being aware of our fear and doing what we know is right, even when we are afraid. I believe that those rebels trying to overturn our elections do not know themselves well, or even accept themselves. And what is more, they're afraid to see that which makes them afraid. For if they did, then I believe they would act out of common decency. The quote we heard from Martin Luther King's sermon of The Strength to Love is quite dark, as he talks about the midnight of our lives right now. And it's quite prescient given that we're facing the pandemic in the way he talks about how science affects our lives. It certainly has advantaged us in so many ways, but it can't really solve the problems by itself. We need love. We need faith to do that. So in the sermon, he points to the possibility of hope as he speaks of the blessings of being tough-minded and tender-hearted. He begins with a quote from Matthew chapter 10, verse 16. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. I remember that quote so well because one of my mentors, Harry Schofield, at the time when I was in seminary, would talk to me about the issues facing me as a student of religion, trying to become a minister. He was the minister of the San Francisco Unitarian Universalist Church the very same sermon that was served by Thomas Stark King in the antebellum era, and whose name graces my seminary, Thomas Stark King School for Religious Leadership. Harry was one of the best preachers I've ever heard, and he spoke to me directly, as if he knew me, as if he knew what I needed to hear. And so when Harry would say this saying, this quote from Matthew, he would emphasize the phrase, wise as serpents. He would say it over and over again, wise as serpents. He knew I needed to hear that. In his sermon, King talked about the need for us to be tough-minded. We need people who engage in hard, solid thinking. He thus criticized soft-mindedness. As he put it, this prevalent tendency towards soft-mindedness is found in man's unbelievable gullibility. Soft-minded individuals are prone to embrace all kinds of superstition. It is the kind of mind, as he put it, that believes lies, especially those lies that are unremittedly repeated. But then King later says that we must not stop with the cultivation of the tough mind. He said, the gospel demands a tender heart. Tough-mindedness without tender-heartedness is cold and detached, leaving one's life in perpetual winter, devoid of the warmth of spring and the gentle heat of summer. The hard-hearted person never truly loves. That person lacks capacity for genuine compassion. As King said, Jesus frequently characterized the hard-hearted rich fool as the one who will go to hell, not because he is wealthy, but because he does not see poor people as his brothers and his sisters. Thus, we need tender-heartedness, for it's there that we find faith, our faith. But King then says there's a third way that combines both tough-mindedness and tender-heartedness, which he says can be found through God and Jesus. And when we find that combination, that balance, then we can begin to have the courage to do that which is right, to work for justice in a peaceful way, because it is a peaceful way that will ultimately lead to a permanent change. And also, it is the only ethical way to live. Later in the sermon, King spoke about the courage to overcome fear. And one of the most important ways of overcoming fear is working within a community, a beloved community such as ours. He tells a story about a meeting when he gave a talk during the Montgomery bus boycott that began in December of 1955 and lasted for more than a year. It was during that time that his home was bombed, that threatened not only him, but his family, that he was arrested, and that he received many threatening phone calls. At one point, he almost decided to quit being the leader of the movement during the boycott. But one person who lifted him up and gave him hope was an elderly Black woman named Mother Pollard. These are his words. Although poverty-stricken and uneducated, she was amazingly intelligent and possessed a deep understanding of the meaning of the movement. After having walked for several weeks, she was asked if she were tired. With ungrammatical profundity, she answered, "My feet is tired, but my soul is rested." King then spoke about his feelings of discouragement at the time of the meeting. And again, this is from his sermon. At the end of the meeting, Mother Pollard came to the front of the church and said, "Come here, son." I immediately went to her and hugged her affectionately. "Something is wrong with you," she said. "You didn't talk strong enough tonight." Seeking further to disguise my fears, I retorted, "Oh no, Mother Pollard, nothing is wrong. I'm feeling as fine as ever." But her insight was discerning. "Now you can't fool me," she said. I know something is wrong. Is it that we ain't doing things to please you? Or is it the white folks is bothering you? Before I could respond, she looked directly into my eyes and said, I done told you we is with you all the way. Then her face became radiant, and she said in words of quiet certainty, but even if we ain't with you, God's going to take care of you. As she spoke these consoling words, everything in me quivered and quickened with the pulsing tremor of raw energy. For those of us who do not believe in God, or certainly in the God that is in the Bible, it may be a bit much for us to take in the idea that Martin King, feeling a rush of energy because Muller Pollard said that God would take care of him. I can tell you that when I was in seminary, I had many fellow seminarian friends who were Christian and who would talk about their faith. Thus, I had to translate for myself what they meant when they were talking about God and Jesus. And this is what I came to. Jesus is that part of ourselves that calls forth to us, that is the best that is within us, our guiding light, if you will. And God is that sense of otherness, of the mystery of life that no one can truly know, but that we can avail ourselves to it through prayer, meditation, or focused action. And every now and then, we can feel its presence, as I believe Martin King did in the presence of Mother Pollard. In other words, we are never alone. We have within ourselves the presence that will guide us and give us faith that reveals to us that no matter what the trials and tribulations brought upon us in our lives, that we can handle it. We may not believe in the idea of prayer, but then perhaps our idea of prayer may be too narrow, that we might think of it as only what people do in church or what they do on their kneeling. But then Elizabeth Siftons asked, what indeed does it mean to prayer? And she wrote, I myself believe it's an activity natural to all humanity. And I'm certain that atheists and secular people pray too, even when they scoff at the very idea. The reassuring truth is that the mode of hope in which prayer is cast is inevitable for all of us. As I see it, it is faith that requires us to be tough-minded so that we can face reality of the difficulties before us with a clear mind, but also to be tender-hearted so that we know and experience the warmth and love of being in relationship with people and indeed with all of creation. It is faith that guides us, gives us the courage to act and act rightly. I will close with what King closed his sermon with, the words of a motto that is commonly found on the wall in homes of devout persons. Fear knocked at the door, faith answered, there was no one there. Go in peace, friends, and keep hope alive.
Thank you, Harold, for the comforting message. I look forward to talking about this during our coffee hour. Now it's time for our offering. Our lives have been graced by many gifts. If you desire and are able to donate to our church, which still has the same expenses as pre-COVID, there are a few ways to do that. You may mail a check to our building. You may give electronically through our church website, or you can give using the Give Plus app on a smartphone or tablet. Your donations are sincerely appreciated and allow us to continue carrying this life-giving message into the wider world.
If this is my last song, if This is my final day. If tomorrow I'll be gone, what do I want to say? This is my last song. If it's my time to go, when my body's moved on, what will I have to show? Oh, but fortune and fame, they scatter to the wind. The things that make a name just don't matter in the end. Is the world a little more peaceful? Oceans and skies a little more blue? Is humankind a little bit wiser about the good that we can do? Does the sun shine a little bit brighter where before it was only rain? If so, then I'm glad I came. These are my last words for all the earth to hear. If all that I have ever been is about to disappear, these are my last words. There's nothing that I need to do. I only have tried to serve. Never been talking anyway. So much hurt there is to heal, it's hard to understand. All I can hope to feel is that I'm doing what I can. Is the world a little more peaceful? Oceans and skies a little more blue? Is humankind a little bit wiser about the good that we can do? Does the sun shine a little bit brighter where before it was only rain? If so, then I'm glad I came. Have I given hope to the hopeless? Has a hungry soul been fed? Has a child stood a little bit taller 'cause of something that I said? Have I left a little kindness? Have I eased a little pain? If so, then I'm glad I came. For that, then I'm glad this is my last song. What do I leave behind? What do I pass on if I am out of time?
Please join Freya in saying the words to extinguish the chalice.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
The closing words are again from Martin Luther King Jr.'s sermon, The Strength to Love. Hatred and bitterness can never cure the disease of fear. Only love can do that. Hatred paralyzes life. Love releases it. Hatred confuses life. Love harmonizes it. Hatred darkens life. Love illuminates it, so be it.